The Churchville Schoolhouse opens the door to the best education in history. Visitors to the historic Churchville one-room schoolhouse take a step back in time to watch history unfold in a restored and accessible National Register of Historic Places property that dates to the 1850s. Today, students can walk in the footsteps of local farm children from the early days of DuPage County for an authentic living history experience led by a schoolmarm from the early 1900s. A visit to the Churchville one-room schoolhouse is hands-on, educational, and fun. Participants use slate chalkboards and McGuffey readers for the day's lessons, and children will be asked to follow proper classroom etiquette. Reading, writing, and arithmetic are all practiced, and students can test their skills during an old-fashioned spelling bee. And of course, no school day is complete without recess, featuring games of the early 1900s. The Churchville Schoolhouse is a popular program for scouts and day camps too. Group visits can be arranged for service clubs, tour groups, and other adult organizations as well. The Churchville Schoolhouse Living History program is operated by the Elmhurst History Museum. Call the museum today to book a field trip or find out more information at 630-833-1457 or visit our website at churchvilleschoolhouse.org. Since the 1830s, Elmhurst has grown from a quiet farming community at the edge of Chicago into a vibrant suburban city that stands on its own. Much has changed since those early days. For more than 60 years, the Elmhurst History Museum has proudly shared the stories that make up Elmhurst's rich and unique history. Today, the Elmhurst History Museum's mission is to engage people with history through our exhibits, collections, and educational programs. The museum presents a wide variety of exhibits annually, including original exhibits planned by our staff, as well as national traveling exhibits from other institutions on a full range of history-related topics. The museum's award-winning exhibit on Elmhurst history in the second floor gallery is an innovative and fascinating look at the story of Elmhurst. Beyond exhibits, our programs and special events actively connect people with history through interesting lectures and tours, fun family activities, exhibit sneak previews, and large-scale special events like the annual Museum Day celebration. Our school programs provide hands-on interactive ways to learn about history. Children love to take part in the immersive experience at our Churchville one-room schoolhouse, led by a schoolmarm from the early 1900s, as well as participate in old-fashioned games and I Spy activities during field trips to the museum. There's always something new to see and do at the Elmhurst History Museum, so be sure to stop by soon at 120 East Park Avenue in downtown Elmhurst. The museum is located in the landmark Gloss Mansion, just across from the Elmhurst Metro Station. The Elmhurst History Museum is open Sunday and Tuesday through Friday from 1 to 5 p.m. and Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Admission is free. For more information, please visit our website at elmhursthistory.org.
This is Elmhurst Time Travelers. I'm Ken Bartels, your host, and we're here at the Churchville Schoolhouse. Everyone in Elmhurst knows about the Elmhurst Chicago Stone Quarry. West Avenue, 2 lobes of the quarry. It's a remarkable physical resource. And it's been a remarkable resource in many ways. It helped to build DuPage County and Elmhurst, and now it's helping to safeguard the area from stormwater. To talk about that part of the quarry's history, we have 2 special guests today. Chris Vonnahme, project engineer with the County of DuPage, and Howard Killian, Director of Public Works with the City of Elmhurst. And gentlemen, welcome to Elmhurst Time Travelers. Very happy you could join me today. I want to go back to the 1987 flood. Now, in conversations with both of you before we were taping, I know you weren't in Elmhurst in 1987,
Correct, right.
but I was. And I remember that as a unbelievably stressful period in every way possible. But I also remember the fact that it just sort of crept up on folks. It wasn't like there'd never been a stormwater event in Elmhurst or in DuPage County before, but all of a sudden it was there, and the National Guard was in town, and people were really, really upset about what was going on, particularly in the southwest portion of Elmhurst. But one of the things about the 1987 flood and its magnitude is what happened afterwards, because it's a wonderful story of how government steps forward frequently, probably more frequently than people give it credit for, but it steps forward frequently to answer these kinds of challenges. So I guess my first question to both of you is based on your experience, city and county, what was the government response to the 1987 flood? Chris, I'll start with you. The county was really involved.
Sure. Well, you know, like you said, the 1987 event was a massive event. The O'Hare rain gauge recorded 9.4 inches of rain in a 24-hour period, and that today still stands as a record for the amount of rainfall that they had in 24 hours. Some portions of the county received over 13 inches of rain in 4 days. There were, in DuPage County alone, 7,500 residential and business structures that flooded during that event, either by the rivers rising out of bank and causing flooding problems, or by sanitary sewer backups. But again, that's just an incredible amount of structures that flooded. We have documents that show that there were $150 million worth of damages caused by that event in 1987 dollars, and that equates to about $325 million in today's dollars. So it was a massive event. And it was that event that was the catalyst for our program to start with. You know, the event happened in August of '87. By November of 1987, the state passed legislation to allow the 5 collar counties surrounding Chicago to form their own stormwater management programs. And then very shortly after that, our Stormwater Management Committee was formed. And our Stormwater Management Committee is made up of county board representatives as well as municipal representatives. And then following that, in 1989, our stormwater management plan was approved, which allowed us to study watersheds as a whole and to develop watershed plans for those watersheds.
And of course, in Elmhurst, Howard, the citizenry was dealing with the absolute effects of flooded basements and backed up sanitary sewers and whatever. But the sewer treatment plant itself was undergoing flooding.
Correct. It's right along Salt Creek on Route 83, and besides the 500 to 1,000 homes we had that were affected by the floodwater, most of the city lost power at that time. So our treatment plant was without power, unable to pump out our sewer systems or treat the sanitary sewers that were coming into the plant. So it kind of double-folded. We had a lot of sewer backups, besides just the road flooding, unable to get to some neighborhoods.
Now, prior to the creation of the stormwater management coming out of the '87 flood, how did the county deal with rain events? In 1980, it rained before 1987, sometimes pretty hard, I suspect.
Well, I think a lot of that fell on the communities, their public works departments. They had drainage groups involved, and but as far as our department wasn't even around until November of '87.
So, 87 flood arrives, government steps up to the plate in multiple ways. Cooperation between municipalities and the county has to ramp up and change on this topic in particular, and we'll relate to that again later in the program. But when did the county first think of acquiring the quarry for stormwater retention purposes?
Well, it was very soon after the event. So after the Stormwater Management Committee was formed, it was the early direction of that committee to address the severe flooding on Salt Creek. And so our engineers and our consultants started evaluating various projects to try to alleviate that flooding so that we wouldn't have those kind of damages from a storm of that magnitude again. And so they came up with a plan, and that plan focused on large regional reservoirs to try to lower flood elevations throughout the county. And some of the projects that were identified in that plan were the Bussey Woods Dam modification up in Elk Grove Village. There's the Meacham Grove Dam and Reservoir located in Bloomingdale. Also in Bloomingdale is the Spring Creek Reservoir. Then we have, moving downstream, the Wooddale Itasca Reservoir, Addison Dam and Pump Station, and Lake Villa Reservoir were all projects identified in the plan, but by far the largest facility and the centerpiece of the plan was the Elmhurst Quarry Flood Control Facility. And again, that plan was approved in 1991.
So it's one thing to put a plan in place and decide this is the right thing to do, and of course decide what the timeline. But what was the reaction of the city and the county to just getting involved with a project of this size? I mean, the reservoirs you mentioned, let alone the quarry, let alone explaining how it was all going to eventually work upstream and downstream. What was the general tenor of the discussions? Did everybody think, oh, this is a great idea, let's do it?
At that time, I think when you look at the magnitude of flooding that occurred in Elmhurst, that's also the same time Elmhurst moved forward with their levee system. So I think they viewed both the acquisition and the use of the quarry and the levees as a needed, both projects were needed to help protect the residents of Elmhurst. So it was a favorable moment to try to acquire that property for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think the overall that was positive and supportive of the project. I think Elmhurst, from what I was told, there was some concerns about losing the Elmhurst Chicago Stone Company. There was going to be the loss of sales revenue from the work that they had done, and then in the future, if that area had been redeveloped with commercial properties, there would be the loss of sales tax there also. But for the most part, I think it was very favorable. I know there was some opposition to the Lower Salt Creek Watershed Plan. Some people in the area wanted to go with more of a Salt Creek Greenway, where the county would go and purchase all of the residential and business structures within the floodplain. The county would purchase those, tear those down, and restore the area to natural floodplain. But there were some problems with that idea because we wouldn't be lowering flood elevations with that plan, and there were still, like emergency services, fire departments, police, ambulance services would be interrupted by large events because roads would still be overtopped and flooded. The other issue was that that Salt Creek Greenway plan was a lot more expensive than constructing the projects within our Lower Salt Creek Watershed Plan by the tune of about $100 million. And so when, and then the communities also were kind of worried about that kind of plan because by buying out all those residential and business structures, they would be losing tax base also from the watershed. So when the Stormwater Committee and the County Board took all that into consideration, they decided that the Lower Salt Creek Watershed Plan was the way to go.
Well, and of course, beyond the large-scale projects that we've already mentioned, there was just the status of the creek itself. I mean, it was, as a waterway, it needed to be dredged, it needed to be cleaned, it needed to have some higher degree of attention than any individual municipality could apply to it. And of course, that happened as well. I think once again, I go back to government's response to an unbelievable problem at the time in attacking, okay, what's going on and what can we do about it? And the fact that there was more than one plan discussed and then ultimately going in one direction or the other proves that that kind of dialogue can actually be helpful. So, how does it actually work? Okay, we now have the quarries. Spent a lot of money on them, but well worth it. We now have the quarries. It rains a lot. What happens then? And I'm going to ask, Chris, I'm going to ask you to start, and then I'm going to ask Howard, I'm going to ask you the question I know you get all the time, and you know what that is. So,
well, okay, well, actually, even before a rainfall event starts, at the county we have a flood forecasting system. And we developed this through a cooperative effort with the United States Geological Survey. And so we can take forecasted rainfall amounts and run them through our hydrologic and hydraulic models. And with those forecasted rainfall amounts, those models will calculate or predict how high the river will get in various locations all along Salt Creek. And so that kind of gives us a heads up before an event even starts, is how high is the flooding going to be, or what roads are going to be underwater, what subdivisions may be threatened, which of our flood control facilities are going to need to be in operation and things like that. So that gives us a little bit of a heads up. But then during the rainfall event, we were able to monitor a lot of our facilities, all of our facilities over the internet. We have video cameras, rain gauges, and stream gauges at various locations that we can monitor stream elevations. And when it's raining, we're watching what's happening out there. And specifically for the Elmhurst Quarry, there's a sluice gate that we can open to allow water into the quarry. And people want to know, well, how do you know when to open that gate? Well, we monitor elevations downstream at Harger Road, which is downstream of the quarry in Oak Brook. And when elevations there reach our trigger elevation, we know that it's time to open the gates and allow water into the quarry. So that's one way it happens. The other way is if we have very large extreme events, we also have fixed weirs out at the facility. A weir is a structure that allows water from the stream to flow over the top of the weir and down into the quarry, okay, basically. And so the weir is about 220 feet long, and it allows for a lot more water to come into the quarry than just through that sluice gate that we operate. So we've had 5 different occasions, 5 different events where water's flowed over the fixed weir, and that was the quarry went online in 1996 as a flood control facility, but we also took in water over that fixed weir in 1998, in October of 2001, September of 2008, and also in 2010 and 2013. Those were very large events where we took a lot of water in. But then once water flows over those weirs, it flows through a box culvert into a vortex drop shaft that drops the water straight down 80 feet, and then there's a tunnel, a 400-foot long tunnel under Route 83 that water then flows through and then accesses the quarry. So that's how the water gets in.
So it comes in on the west lobe, and then, but the east lobe fills first, is that correct?
That's correct. The east lobe is the deeper lobe. It's about 100 feet in elevation lower than the west lobe. And so water flows through the west lobe in a concrete lined channel, riprap channel. It flows through the keyway and into the east lobe since it's the deeper lobe.
Okay. So Howard, when all this is going on, I know your office is getting calls, and they're getting calls in the general notion of what's going on, I'm flooding, but nothing's happening at the quarry. Like somebody needs to go in and press the button.
Right, we get that call a lot. Whenever we have any backup on our streets or in the houses, people are saying, how can I be flooding? Who's not opening the gate to the quarry? Where's our water? Why isn't it going in there? Who's not on work today type thing. But what they don't know is none of our normal stormwater flows into the quarry directly. So all of our sewers are routed either to the north, to the south, into the creek itself. Nothing other than our current project, which is the overflow, goes into the quarry. So none of our daily stormwater actually goes into the quarry itself.
Yeah, and The other larger issue, of course, is we're talking about and we'll continue to talk about Salt Creek flooding and what was done to mitigate it, as opposed to other types of flooding and what has to be done to take care of that. That's for another day. So when both lobes fill up, how much is in there?
The capacity of the quarry is about 2.7 billion gallons. And in flood control, we talk about acre feet of storage.
Feet, yeah.
The quarry provides 8,300 acre feet of water. And so if you have an acre of land and you stack water 1 foot on top of that, that's 1 acre foot. So it's 8,300 acre feet. It's massive. It's by far the largest flood control facility that we have in the county. And it's one of the largest non-federally funded flood control facilities in the nation. So it's very large.
So how full has it ever gotten? I think I know the answer to that, but I'm going to let the two of you answer it.
I wasn't here at the time, but I believe it was the 2010 storm. It was probably within, what I've been told is about 10 feet. It looked like about 10 feet to the top during that flooding event.
It was actually the 2008 event.
Oh, 2008, okay.
2008 event, and yeah, so we were substantially full there. We estimated that it was only about 1 to 2 feet from reaching the top of the high wall. But so that was the event where, and I never thought I would ever see it that full, but sure enough, in 2008 it was there.
Yeah, I was telling you both beforehand, and we're going to go to break here in just a second, but a quick personal story. The 2008 event, I'm driving down West Avenue, and I see a car pulled over to the side, and it turns out to be Mayor Tom Marcucci at that point, the mayor of Elmhurst, staring into the west lobe, probably asking him this very same question that we just talked about. What happens? What happens if it fills up?
Right.
It didn't. Hopefully it never will. So we're going to go to break, and we'll be back. This is Elmhurst Time Travelers. We're talking about the Elmhurst Chicago Stone Quarry and the remarkable resource that it is. We'll be right back.
Have you checked out Elmhurst Public Library lately? Prepare to be amazed. The new Makery, located in the library's renovated basement, provides a hands-on creative space for patrons to invent, collaborate, and design as they transform their ideas into reality. From laser cutters to embroidery machines, the Makery has something sure to pique everyone's interest. This open, flexible work area creates an environment to create, connect, and explore. EPL cardholders, District 205 teachers and students, Elmhurst College students, work perks, and business cardholders are welcome to use the space. For more information, go to elmlib.org/makery. Let's make things happen.
The Elmhurst Quarry Flood Control Facility is an 8,300 acre-foot flood control facility on which construction began in March of 1993. When Salt Creek water elevations near flood stage, floodgates open and excess water begins spilling into the diversion channel. The channel funnels floodwater into a vortex drop shaft into a 400-foot long tunnel which carries the water under Route 83 and into the quarry's west lobe. Once in the west lobe, floodwater is further conveyed through a keyway into the deeper east lobe. The water is then held in the quarry until Salt Creek has receded to a safe level. The water is then pumped back to Salt Creek at safe flow rates.
Welcome back to Elmhurst Time Travelers. We're talking about the Elmhurst Quarry and its particular use right now as a stormwater management feature. And Chris and Howard, we've talked about how often the quarry gets used. And Chris, I think you mentioned that it's been used to some degree or another 4 or 5 times since it came online.
Well, that specifically was the
large events?
Yeah, for the large events, for the fixed weir. And so water elevations have to rise high enough to flow over that weir. But there's a sluice gate that we can open, and we take water in very frequently. So the quarry went online. It was constructed, the flood control facility was completed in 1996. And since that time, we usually operate the quarry on average about 2 to 3 times per year. So since it went online in 1996, we've operated it maybe 45 to 50 times.
Okay. Now, obviously, it makes a great deal of difference how much water actually gets in it. But what's the process for getting it back out again in terms of how long it takes? Obviously, depending on how much is in there, but on how long it takes and what is the process when it comes back out. So, Chris, you want to start with that?
So if both lobes were completely filled, it would take about 72 days to completely dewater, okay? And to get the water out, we have 2 pumping stations. There's one pumping station in the east lobe and one in the west lobe. And during a very extreme event, when both lobes are filled, we can dewater both lobes by just using the west lobe pumping station. And the west lobe pump station kicks on, and it will dewater both lobes until the west lobe is completely dry, and then we have water still sitting in the east lobe. And in that situation, we turn the pumps on in the east lobe. The east lobe pumps pump the water to the west lobe pump station, and then the west lobe pump station pumps the water all the way back out to an aeration facility that we have on the east bank of Salt Creek. And that aeration facility, because the water could be sitting in there for 72 days, it gets stagnant. We wanted to re-aerate the water before it enters Salt Creek. So the water gets pumped into the back of that aeration facility. As it rises, it then starts to spill down a series of steps. And just by spilling down those steps, that's what re-aerates the water before it re-enters Salt Creek.
Okay. Is there a standard for how long water will be retained in the quarry? I mean, obviously the storms need to pass and it doesn't have to be a particular event, but is there a protocol for how quickly it gets pumped back out?
We typically wait until Salt Creek recedes, is no longer in flood stage, and then we want to get right on it and start pumping that water back out because we want to get that storage available for the next flood event. We typically leave maybe 10 to 12 feet of water in the quarry for any of the fish and other wildlife that survive and live in the quarry. So we'll leave some water in there, but typically we want to get that water out of there as quickly as possible so that it's available for the next event.
Now, it's a county facility and the county is in charge of it, but how much communication goes on when it's in operation or just normal kind of conversation at that point?
I think what we do is when we see the heavy rains coming in, and we can monitor their gauges, they're available online to us. When we start seeing the water rising or we know there's a heavy rain event, one of the calls we usually get from elected officials or the managers, like, are they letting water in the quarry? So we kind of call, our staff will make calls over to their staff and just say, hey, you operating the quarry today? And they're pretty good. They let us know if we don't call them. They'll call us and say, hey, the quarry's going to go online later tonight, or we expect it to go online this weekend. So It's good communication.
The west lobe had quite a bit of fill placed in it earlier, and it's I don't know if that was the practice before the county purchased it or whether that's not going on anymore. Correct?
No, that's right. Right when we purchased the quarry back in 1992, the Elmhurst Chicago Stone Company was utilizing the west lobe of the quarry as a construction debris landfill, a clean construction debris landfill. And what had happened is they had exhausted the amount of stone in the surface mine. They then started doing an underground mine, and so that freed up the space in the two surface lobes. And that's when they started doing that. I think it was in the mid-'80s when they started using that as a construction debris landfill. But once the county purchased it, we no longer did those landfilling operations because we wanted that area, that volume, to be available for flood storage.
Okay. As both of you know, while we've been talking and during this entire program, there's unique quarry footage that was shot earlier that the public's never seen before. Obviously, most people will never be at the bottom of the quarry, and they're going to get an opportunity on this program to see footage that most people have never had an opportunity to see. I presume both of you have been down there. I was down there once, briefly. I was even supposed to be there, so it was all right. But now, you speed up to more of the present day, and Howard, you mentioned that most of Elmhurst water doesn't go in the quarry, but now a little bit of it does, and a relatively recent wonderful communication and cooperation between the city and the county. Can you sort of tell us what that is?
Right. If you remember, not from Salt Creek flooding, but back in the late 2000s into 2010 and 2013, Elmhurst had a lot of localized rainfall, which caused neighborhoods to flood, not from the Salt Creek backing up, but just water unable to leave the neighborhoods. One of those neighborhoods was directly east of the quarry, within 2 to 3 blocks. And it was just kind of weird, that they were, here you have a neighborhood that's flooding, and at that time the quarry's dry. No water's going into it. So we did a lot of studies. That was one of the projects, after about 9 or 10 other ones we were looking at, that showed, okay, we could put a large diameter pipe. And originally at the time, we were looking to put the detention on the south side of the railroad tracks, basically across from the quarry. That was a rather large project. We would have had to go underneath the railroad tracks with a large diameter pipe. And the discussion started going, well, what if we actually use the quarry for some of our stormwater overflow? Our theory was that we were looking at about 20 acre feet. So when you compare the 20 acre feet to the 8,300, it's a minor amount. May not even know, that it's in there. And also when it rains by us, our water could already be in there before Salt Creek even starts to come up in that event. So the discussion started with the county, and we were very happy as a city that they allowed us to at least start looking at the possibility of draining this neighborhood directly into the east lobe. And then during that process, we refined it, but an agreement came through.
Well, I remember watching the discussions and the negotiation, and it seemed to me to go wonderfully quick for an intergovernmental agreement.
It did, in our opinion, go rather quick, but it was also interesting that it wasn't as staff from Elmhurst, it wasn't really the first project we were looking at to get completed. We had a few others, 4 others that were lined up, but the cooperation with the county provided to us, that project actually moved to the forefront and was the first large-scale project that we completed in Elmhurst.
Now there's once again, now there's a unique feature on it. Would be the southeastern is where the spillway now goes into the western lobe.
Correct.
There's an observation deck there with some interesting information on the quarry.
You kind of along with Howard was saying, there was very good intergovernmental cooperation with that project. Elmhurst had a need for storage. We had the hole in the ground, and so as they were doing their work, they cleared a large area. This is on the east lobe, just north of the intersection of Highland and First Avenue.
Yeah, east lobe, right.
In the east lobe, that's right. And so they did a lot of tree clearing, cleared out the vegetation there, and made a beautiful overlook for the east lobe. And so the county, since they did that for us, we went in and installed permeable pavers. We have some signage out there to talk about the flood control facility and the history of the quarry. And now people can go out there during a flood event or during the day on a very nice day and just enjoy the nice views that they have out there in the east lobe.
The county also is involved in the whole flood mapping of the region. And I know the flood map has been discussed and Could you, do you know what the exact status of the flood map is
Well, sure.
right now?
The status of the floodplain mapping is that we've been, over the last several years, working very closely with FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, on updating the floodplain maps throughout DuPage County. We've been trying to incorporate new topography, changes in the watershed, new developments that have occurred since the last maps became effective, as well as the incorporation of our flood control facilities into those new maps. And so right now, those maps are being reviewed by the Illinois State Water Survey, and we anticipate that they will go effective in the next 18 months, so maybe in the middle of 2019.
Well, as both of you would know, March is Severe Weather Preparedness Month, and while we'll certainly hope that we don't have to deal with any floods in March or any time for a while anyway, it's a good thing to be aware. Is anything that the city and county do with, as it relates to March being that special month? I'm sure notifications and emails and this kind of thing.
From the city's end, we try to remind people who are known flooding areas. Again, we still have some low points to, one of the big programs we do before every storm is clean our inlets. Make sure that our own pipes are clean, that leaves are off the street, just to prevent localized flooding. So we do a lot of that, but we do remind people, check your sump pumps, check if you need a generator, just a reminder of everything they need to do if that situation were to occur.
Well, the city, I had the city manager Jim Grabowski and Mayor Steve Morley here a few episodes ago, and we talked about everything the city of Elmhurst is doing, and obviously addressing it from a citizenry standpoint, which is very much appreciated, I know. I thank you both for joining me. I think the quarry is both, it's been a historical resource, as I've said, it's a present day resource as well, and it's a interesting story any way you look at it, because it's the site of the oldest business in Elmhurst and one of the oldest businesses in the state, actually, and yet it still has a very important current day relevance. So thank you both for joining me. This has been Elmhurst Time Travelers. I'm Ken Bartels, and we will see you again.
The Churchville Schoolhouse opens the door to the best education in history. Visitors to the historic Churchville one-room schoolhouse take a step back in time to watch history unfold in a restored and accessible National Register of Historic Places property that dates to the 1850s. Today, students can walk in the footsteps of local farm children from the early days of DuPage County for an authentic living history experience led by a schoolmarm from the early 1900s. A visit to the Churchville one-room schoolhouse is hands-on, educational, and fun. Participants use slate chalkboards and McGuffey readers for the day's lessons, and children will be asked to follow proper classroom etiquette. Reading, writing, and arithmetic are all practiced, and students can test their skills during an old-fashioned spelling bee. And of course, No school day is complete without recess, featuring games of the early 1900s. The Churchville Schoolhouse is a popular program for scouts and day camps too. Group visits can be arranged for service clubs, tour groups, and other adult organizations as well. The Churchville Schoolhouse Living History program is operated by the Elmhurst History Museum. Call the museum today to book a field trip or find out more information at 630-833-1457 or visit our website at churchvilleschoolhouse.org. Since the 1830s, Elmhurst has grown from a quiet farming community at the edge of Chicago into a vibrant, suburban city that stands on its own. Much has changed since those early days. For more than 60 years, the Elmhurst History Museum has proudly shared the stories that make up Elmhurst's rich and unique history. Today, the Elmhurst History Museum's mission is to engage people with history through our exhibits, collections, and educational programs. The museum presents a wide variety of exhibits annually, including original exhibits planned by our staff, as well as national traveling exhibits from other institutions on a full range of history-related topics. The museum's award-winning exhibit on Elmhurst history in the second floor gallery is an innovative and fascinating look at the story of Elmhurst. Beyond exhibits, our programs and special events actively connect people with history through interesting lectures and tours, fun family activities, exhibit sneak previews, and large-scale special events like the annual Museum Day celebration. Our school programs provide hands-on interactive ways to learn about history. Children love to take part in the immersive experience at our Churchville one-room schoolhouse, led by a school marm from the early 1900s, as well as participate in old-fashioned games and I Spy activities during field trips to the museum. There's always something new to see and do at the Elmhurst History Museum, so be sure to stop by soon at 120 East Park Avenue in downtown Elmhurst. The museum is located in the landmark Gloss Mansion, just across from the Elmhurst Metro Station. The Elmhurst History Museum is open Sunday and Tuesday through Friday from 1 to 5 p.m. and Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Admission is free. For more information, please visit our website at elmhursthistory.org.